Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Bryan from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Security Squawk podcast. We've got a jam-packed episode today with some major developments in the cybersecurity world. We're going to talk about the Comcast data breach. We're going to talk about the healthcare sector and a new ransomware group heavily targeting them and what's behind that and why we want to talk about it. Columbus is still reeling from their cyber attack with more developments there from the city of Columbus. We're seeing a massive uptick in the number of ransomware groups that exist out there, which is becoming alarming for a lot of cybersecurity researchers, and we're going to talk about why. We're also going to talk about companies that are setting up cloud environments and leaving them completely exposed for data breaches and cyber attacks, and we're going to highlight what's going on there and how prevalent that is. And we're going to deep dive a little bit into a dental practice, a small business that had to deal with a ransomware attack, and we're going to share our insights around that story as well, gentlemen. But before we do, I'm getting feedback. Before we do, I lost my spot there. Just a quick reminder about our fee for the show. In the show, we put together every week valuable content to help educate you around cybersecurity. And the fee is simple. We don't run ads. We don't bore you with, stuff about products and services. Plus, the other important thing, guys, is like when you start taking ads, those advertisers kind of start telling you what you can and can't say. We're not going to let that happen on this show, right? So just a quick reminder to share this content. If you're watching it live, you can share it out. You can like it. If you're listening to it on a podcasting platform, you can leave a review or you can give it a 5-star rating on the podcasting platform, wherever you're listening to this right now. All those things help other people find this content. That's how the internet works. It's a vote saying, hey, I like this stuff. It's educational. It makes you think. It gives you a new perspective. If it does any of those things, just do us a favor and share the show. Right, guys?
That's right. We really appreciate it.
Randy, any thoughts there?
Yeah, like I always say, there's no real fee involved other than sharing because it's free, but free is in free beer. It's not free that it's not valuable. This is very, very valuable content, but it's free like free beer.
Yep. And just share the show. That's all we ask. Pretty simple. All right, guys, let's get into it. Comcast, big company. I think they are a victim of what would be considered a supply chain or third-party event. But unfortunately, if you have owed money to Comcast in the last couple of years, you probably ended up with this collection company. And unfortunately, Comcast's favorite collection company was hit with a ransomware attack, which exposed 230,000 customer data. And one report that I saw said that they had social security numbers in that data set. I don't have that in front of me right now, but
the article says
that's the deal. So let's talk about it. What's going on here?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this is just one of those incidents where, it's not necessarily Comcast's fault, but because they have the big name and they make the headlines, they're now on a fallout because of someone else's irresponsibility in protecting the data that they shared with them.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that they're totally off the hook, though, because they did choose to use the vendor. And I would bet that if this goes to some sort of lawsuit trial type thing, that Comcast's going to have to verify that they properly vetted this third party, debt debt person. But wow, the list of stuff, names and addresses, social security numbers, dates of birth, account numbers, and ID numbers. So just with the social security and the dates of birth, how often do you call some kind of provider and they're like, oh yeah, we can help you with that problem. First, let's get you verified. And what do they ask? Can you please tell us your date of birth? You tell them the date of birth. Can you please tell us the last four of your social? Last four of social. Okay, boom. Now you're verified. Now you're verified, and we can let you do whatever you want. So there's a lot of room here for criminals to make money off of this leak for sure.
But the question I have is, like, I'll ask it to either one of you. If you stop doing work for one of your clients, how long do you keep the data? Because this is stuff that happened 4 years ago, like clients that we no longer do business with, 90 days, 120 days, but that's it. After that, we delete it.
Right.
Yeah, you do the right thing, right? We evaluate companies all the time, and they have data going back 20 years, right? The proverbial, N drive, right? That every company dumps everything into. And then you go and look in there and it's like, you have stuff in here that's like 20 years old and it hasn't been modified in 20 years. Like, why are you storing this still? Like, and companies rarely go, especially small companies, rarely go through a process of cleaning up their digital assets and looking at things and saying, do we really need to keep this? Everybody just kind of, has been trained or been, just have done it this way where they just store, and they don't ever take the time, maybe quarterly or annually, to go through the data, audit it, and decide whether it needs to be kept or delete it or maybe put somewhere else.
So what's interesting here is Comcast fired or quit using FCBS. I believe that's their initials. Mm-hmm. Quit using them in 2020. Mm-hmm. And the breach happened in March 2024. So how much of that data that FCBS had belonging to Comcast should they have kept for those 4 years after they died? After they were fired, they shouldn't have kept any of that. Maybe there were some negotiations going on. Maybe they might've got rehired in 2021, but they should have cut that data loose. So when they got hacked, they didn't have any of Comcast data. And then also raises the question, who else does FCBS do data recovery for? Who's people who have now been, leaked onto the dark web? Was Comcast their only customer?
Well, no, it actually lists some other things. But one other point before we get there is, one thing that hackers are realizing is that they can go after these third parties, because, trying to hack Comcast may be a mission. But if you try to go after one of their suppliers, they may have more lax standards. I think we saw that with the Colonial Pipeline as well, right? So you always have, not necessarily the big company you're going after, but just who they provide data for. That just may be an easier target.
So interesting, guys. We'll keep everyone up to date on this one, but it does beg the question, what do companies do, when they end the relationship, right? There's all this talk of third-party risk. Make sure you're managing third-party risk, and it's clear as day here in this situation. Comcast should have done some kind of follow-up to make sure that this information really got removed or got deleted, and it really makes you question: should you be giving data like this and allowing these entities to store it on their own systems? Or are we in a world where you need to, especially when it comes to PII, guys, and anything sensitive, do you need to control that in your own system and give your third party access to it so you control it at the end of the day? So I guess I agree with you, Randy, when you say Comcast is somewhat to blame here, because it seems like they were a little bit sloppy in how they handled this relationship. So let's move right along, guys. This healthcare sector is under siege. The healthcare industry continues to be a prime target for cyber criminals, as it's very lucrative. A new ransomware strain called Trinity has emerged, and it's caught the attention of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the FBI, and CISA. And they've issued a warning about this threat, emphasizing the need for heightened security measures in the medical field. So Trinity is a ransomware group that has decided to, like other ransomware groups, basically specialize or niche down and only go after a specific sector. So let's talk about what's going on in the ransomware world, guys, because we're going to touch on another article or another topic here in a couple minutes about the these ransomware groups in 2024 and the emergence of several new ones. I guess we could talk about it at the same time. And these ransomware groups are always pivoting and always changing, but it's interesting as to how this is all evolving, based on like things like payouts and commission rates to like the business is changing a lot. Like you hear these massive ransomware payments getting paid to ransomware groups, but the reality of it is the ransomware, the people that run the ransomware are not taking that much anymore because there's so many attacks happening. I believe they've diversified. Like they can just take a little bit, and these initial access brokers and the people who break in are the ones who are getting paid the most. And that's essentially, what Trinity is. Trinity is setting up a pathway for people to hack hospitals and then easily deploy ransomware to that industry based on the vulnerabilities that they know exist. So they have a run book, they have a playbook against this industry, and they're targeting them, and they hope that playbook is just like a rinse and repeat process for the most part once they have access to a network.
Yeah, and just like how most industries, you have a vertical, right? You have your niche. The ones of saying, all right, I'm going to just go after this. This is exactly what they're doing, because they realize that there's a lot of money that can be made.
Riches and niches.
There you go, right? Yeah. So you target healthcare organizations. They're going to have sensitive information. That if you can take them down, the pressure is going to be on. That they're going to have to report this to some type of government agency or get government agency help. And that once they steal the data, you can now, especially if you have the patient's information, their name, email address, you can now try to go to them and say, we have your information, and if you don't pay us, we're going to now, release it. So getting just money from all sides.
Yeah, and I'm not really surprised by this, Bryan, because it's really a matter of that whole term in business. And I realize this is a crooked form of business, but it's that whole first to market, first in the market, or whatever. There's I in fact, when you first started reading this article, I actually laughed because I had a history professor who was real impactful on my life. And I quote him like every other day. And the quote that I remember is follow the money. It's always about the money, or it's almost always about the money. And okay, so what's the deal here? There's still money to be made. And so more groups are getting in. Now there's more competition, but we know from remediating hacked clients that there is a glut of hacks and a shortage of ransomware groups to go in and deploy the ransomware and all of that jazz. So there's money. There's a shortage of ransomware groups to meet the need, quote unquote, which is a horrible way to say it, but that's the bottom line. That's why we're seeing a 30% year over year growth of people getting into the dark side of this industry.
And just imagine all the unreported cases, the small businesses, that don't report it, that don't go on the news.
Most of them are unreported.
Yeah, we run into that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are just unreported. So a couple other things, just highlighting what we know about this whole thing with Trinity. Like, is there anything, are you guys seeing anything out there as to what they're targeting in terms of vulnerabilities, or do you think it's another Swiss Army knife type of situation?
I don't know specifically here. I know generally speaking, it's going to be that Swiss Army knife. It's going to be get control, and then you got to live off the land, basically off the vulnerabilities that you can find that give
Here's the report from HHS. Trinity ransomware was first seen around May of 2024, and it's a type of malicious software that infiltrates systems through several attack vectors, including phishing emails, malicious websites, and exploitation of software vulnerabilities.
Boom and boom.
Yeah. Upon installation, Trinity ransomware begins gathering system details. There you go, the Swiss Army knife, right? And such as a number of processors, available threads, and connected drives to optimize its multi-thread encryption operation. So what does this company have out there for processing power? And what can we do? Mm-hmm. That, like, this is what they're, right? How quickly can we deploy based on the computers that are in the environment? You got shitty computers, these guys can't move as fast. You got good computers, you're in a lot of trouble. Next, Trinity ransomware will attempt to escalate its privileges by impersonating the token of a legitimate process. This allows it to evade security protocols and protections. And additionally, Trinity ransomware performs network scanning and lateral movement, indicating its ability to spread and carry out attacks across multiple systems in a targeted network. So in other words, like I said, when I initially talked about this, they have a playbook, a run book of stuff that they know works in these environments, and they just go through that whole run book as quick as they can and see what they can exploit. And usually they're going to be successful because they have experience with this. They know what these organizations are doing, what they're running, and they know what they can take advantage of because they've done it before. And, you do it in one doctor's office or you do it at one hospital, and more than likely they're running the same, EHR, EMR system, the same, back-end software, they're using Outlook. And they probably all have the same vulnerabilities. So when you're doing things like sending phishing emails and setting up fake websites, these are for the sole purpose of stealing credentials so they can take advantage of these vulnerabilities and move laterally.
Yep. And more doctors, especially on the smaller ones, they're going, digital, storing more patients' information online. So they're a target.
All right. Moving right along here, let's update the world on what's going on in the city of Columbus, guys. This
one is my favorite one today. I think we should take some time to really go.
Absolutely. This is the debacle of all debacles. I didn't think, certain ransomware attacks that I think of that were PR nightmares, like UHS has always been the top one for me. But the city of Columbus is just taking the cake. I mean, every week and month that goes by, it's how this mayor is still in office or still has his job is just mind-boggling to me. But the city of Columbus is still dealing with the grappling with the aftermath of a significant cyber attack. The city council has approved additional spending for recovery efforts. I hope that cyber guy that got in trouble is getting some of this. Underscoring the long-lasting impact of financial burden of such incidents on local governments. So what are you guys seeing here? What are you seeing that's interesting to you, Andre?
Well, the fact that they're going to be spending $7 million, I don't know how many computers they have, but I'm sure we can all agree if they signed a 3-year contract with any one of us, we would have made sure it's less than $7 million. So, and here what we see is, $2.4 million. Well, let me go to the best one I like. Because this, I would say, is wasted money. $2 million on legal counsel. That's wasted money for litigation-related support. They hired a big law firm for breach counsel, project management, overseeing the forensic analyst. All of that is wasted money. System forensics and cyber threat monitoring, 2.4 million. So now they have to now go in depth to see, forensic remediation, data mining, and long-term monitoring of the cyber threat. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just the last one, up to $2,500 for expenses such as hard drives and tools. Why not lump that into one of these other ones?
Right. Yeah.
It's so stupid.
So let's talk about some of the things that I've pulled out as highlights of this attack. The attack occurred around late July or August, so that's how long they've been dealing with this. Some of the other things that I found interesting, guys, was a lot of people who are close to the situation are basically saying this was like 100% preventable. The mayor had come out initially and said that the data that was stolen was encrypted. The reality of it is that what's already been found on the dark web, which is most of it, didn't have much of its data encrypted. So the mayor was speaking out of school when he said what he said. The other issue is they made it really easy for the attackers because all the databases the city used were all linked, which made it way more easier for these guys. They basically had to exploit one system to get to all the data that the city was using because they were dumping it basically all into probably one SQL server would be my guess. There's also been questions as to whether the city has been auditing its cybersecurity practices because they basically said not only were they not following best practices, they can't really find any practices that the city was following. That's pretty damning. And then you look at, that's just the protection side of it. I always like to talk about detection and response too, guys. The detection was clearly not there. And then the response, let's look at some of the fumbles on the response. No employees in the Department of Technology have been fired, disciplined, suspended, or reprimanded following the attack. The city is focusing on incident response, system restoration, and prevention of future attacks. And they're working with the FBI and quote-unquote cybersecurity experts to complete the ongoing investigation. They also, I'll consider this a misstep. They also got this restraining order against this Connor Goodwolf after he made public statements about the attack. And now here we are with this Columbus City Council approving the additional spending for recovery efforts, further worsening this financial impact of the incident on the city. I guess the people of Ohio and the city of Columbus do not realize that they're the ones paying for this.
Right.
Because there doesn't seem to be much of an uproar around this. They're just kind of like, it's almost like they're dealing with like a hurricane or a major rainstorm or something, right? No, like you can't prevent that from happening. Again, this was preventable. And the fact that people are not losing their jobs is just absolutely mind-boggling to me. I don't know if you guys agree with my thoughts, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And something else that was pointed out in the article is that the city, I think he was the city, hold on, let me find it. Yeah, okay, so he was a city commissioner, and he basically was saying that he wasn't concerned about the money. His concern is just making sure that, the data and the privacy of the residents is, reassured, which is garbage, because if you were that concerned, you would have done it right before, or much more.
I mean, I think I said it before. I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like and I said that months ago. I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he needs to get people around him who can advise him, right? Like the three of us. I'm not saying he should hire the three of us. He should find somebody like the three of us who can tell him, like, dude, don't go out there and say that because you don't know.
And he basically was just like saying, well, whatever, the 7 million is nothing. It's like, it's not my
Lehigh Valley Network just learned that. I mean, they're paying $65 million in a class action lawsuit because people's nude photos ended up on the dark web because of their breach, right? But had they paid the hackers, it would have cost them a lot less than $65 million. These knuckleheads think that not paying the ransom and being this noble thing is the way to go. and it's not. You have to look at this from all angles and make the right decision from a business standpoint. You're now costing the taxpayers of Columbus millions and millions and millions of dollars because of your poor decision making.
Well, and I also got to say this $7.5 million, they have 7,500 employees. I looked it up ish. We don't know the exact number. Let's assume that that's ballpark, probably a good number. Judging on the size of the city, it's probably not far off. $7.5 million. That's a drop in the bucket. And that is a tiny little Band-Aid to stop the little bleeding for a little bitty bit. And they're going to be looking at paying a lot more than that.
Oh yeah, good point. I mean, yeah, I mean that's almost, for me, it's, you don't need to say it, but you do need to say it. Yeah, this is just the beginning.
Right.
The bills and the class action lawsuits are coming. Right, all these employees are unionized for the most part. I would assume that union's going to, easy access to everybody through the union, and here's a lawyer who wants to represent us in a class action lawsuit for free until we get paid. Okay, good luck. And then the city's going to have to defend that. So it's going to be ugly. We'll keep everyone updated. All right, let's move right along, guys, to this interesting study where companies are being accused, basically coming out of this study, that 40% of companies out there are at risk from what is being called the toxic Cloud Triad. And it's a combination of threats that pose a significant danger to cloud-based systems data, requiring a reevaluation of cloud security strategies. And basically what's going on here is that companies are not fully understanding when they set up these cloud environments and these applications. They're not understanding the full breadth and depth and power of these applications. And it's partly, I guess, the term shadow IT, which is basically when your employees go out and find other SaaS applications and web applications that are not approved by the company to get work done. That's part of what's going on here. But it's also companies thinking like, oh, it's a website. It's a SaaS application. It's on the web. We can do this ourselves. We don't need to involve IT.
Right.
And it's partly that too, where just because it's in the cloud, there's this false sense of security that whoever's running the website is taking care of all that for you. But the reality of it is things. So let's just use Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, for example. There are so many settings in there that somebody could flick on, flick off, that could expose your data, that could allow somebody in that you don't want to be in there. And as more companies move more information and do more business in these cloud environments, it becomes more risky to be doing this stuff. And it's lost on a lot of companies out there that they need to hire an IT professional and a security professional to set up and monitor these cloud applications. I don't care how big or small they are. Somebody should have eyeballs on it and be looking at it from a security standpoint and evaluating your risk when you're putting these things in there. And that's basically what this story highlights. This story highlights a massive problem for most businesses out there where they've approached the cloud in a way that is completely risky and unsafe and will lead to more cyber attacks and more data breaches down the road. This is exactly why I say on this show all the time that businesses are so far behind the eight ball and so not prepared for what's going to happen. These are the things I'm talking about. These are the things that I'm thinking in my brain that I don't necessarily get into specifics on the show because most people won't understand it anyway. So, but this is a major problem. And I think this is going to be a major problem for probably the next 5 years.
Yeah,
companies learn to use the cloud the right way.
I'm about to break my neck over here from shaking back and forth.
Sorry.
But no. Just because, we know complexity is the enemy of security. Okay. You learn that and you're like your first class when you take cybersecurity. That that's a big problem here. And, you know, as the security risks have grown, 365, that's probably the most popular cloud environment. That's not the only one they're talking about. But like, let's look at 365. It's become more and more complex. And often we'll do a cybersecurity risk assessment on an organization that thinks they're secure. Like we just found one recently. They think they're secure. They even have rules for MFA, but we showed in the data, here's a crap ton of people that don't even have MFA turned on. Here is a global admin that doesn't have MFA turned on. So obviously your policies are misconfigured. They're there. You've got policies for MFA. You got all the right things, it looks like, but they're misconfigured because they're not working. And that's part of the triad, you know, this idea of misconfigurations, giving people too much, like making somebody a global admin that doesn't need to be, and then, you know, not taking care of vulnerabilities, whether that's updating something or whatever that is. Wow. Yeah. I'm not surprised by this. You're right. I think on your assessment, Bryan, that we're looking at probably 5 years, maybe, before everybody catches up. Most IT companies don't know how to properly configure 365. And so they're pushing people to the cloud, and they still don't know how to properly configure the 365 either. So,
and one word, Randy, that you said is it's getting more complex, but at the same time, they've also make it more easier as far as the graphic user interface, right? Mm-hmm. They're making it, oh, you want to add a user? Okay, you can go on YouTube and learn how to add a user, then go onto your side. But then, like you said, maybe then they forgot to turn on MFA, and then there's no policy that says if an account has not had MFA turned on for more than X hours, it automatically locks. Like, right. I was speaking with a potential client yesterday, and she was the admin. She was the global admin, and whenever there's someone, and she even said it, it's like, oh, we want to be able, because they do a lot of volunteer staff. Mm-hmm. And if we need to let go of somebody, we don't want to wait 2 hours to then shut them down. We want to turn them off right away. That's why I'm the global admin. And I was like, oh, right. And is that your login, or you have a separate login? And no, she was like, no, it's my username. I was like, all right. I didn't tell her anything bad, but I was like, all right. And that's exactly what we see.
So just highlighting some of the key findings out of the article, you know, the big things are the root causes, which are mainly misconfigurations, excessive permissions, meaning, you know, people don't understand, like, giving somebody global admin is not good, and you can't just do that because, you know, that's what works when we try to fix things and do things. So, you know, they think that, okay, my account should be a global admin. And then existing vulnerabilities, right? Existing vulnerabilities either on the systems that allow hackers to then get into the cloud. We talked about that when we referenced the Swiss Army knives the last 2 weeks. Like, these are things that hackers are looking for. They're looking for credentials either stored locally or ways that they can get them from your users so they can get into those clouds. And they can get those through a lot of different ways. But 83% almost, guys, of organizations have outdated or unused credentials or access keys that have high severity excessive permission. So in other words, this is like having an administrator account linked to your VPN and your administrator was fired 4 years ago. Right? This is like colonial pipeline waiting to happen in people's cloud environments all over again. Right? I'm trying to get more data here on another point here, because it says many organizations have publicly accessible storage assets, and we see this all the time, right? We see some hacker comes along or some security researcher comes along and finds somebody's Amazon S3 bucket was exposed and it has all this data in it. These are things that, you know, small businesses, they have the luxury of not making it in the news when these things get exposed, right, guys? No different here than what we talk about all the time. But storage buckets, storage assets in the cloud being exposed is freakishly common with organizations because they don't understand this stuff. 41% of assets, cloud assets, permit inbound access. meaning anybody from the internet can get to these things. There's no firewall. There's nothing preventing it. They're not behind a SASE, right? And these are technologies that exist that basically erase you from the internet, right? And companies aren't implementing these strategies, and they're just leaving their cloud environments completely exposed for anybody to come along and start banging on the front door. So it's around, actually I found it, it's around 58% of organizations have exposed unrestricted storage buckets out there.
Wow.
So that's crazy. Anything else you guys want to highlight out of this?
Yeah, I mean, so maybe that's how many have exposed the actual, it's open, you can access it. But we're talking about from this report that 74% have storage that's just publicly exposed in general,
right?
Which means over time they can probably get in.
Right. It also means that they don't have anybody monitoring or looking for this stuff, which
right.
Quite frankly, every business, as soon as you put stuff in the cloud, like in your office, you had a firewall, which blocked traffic, and your IT team was probably monitoring that for, bad stuff happening, traffic getting through that's not supposed to get through. You aren't, what we're saying is you're not setting up that firewall, number one. And number two, you don't have anybody looking at who's accessing what and what traffic is going over that cloud, which the technology exists for you to be able to do this, and you should be doing it. And what we're learning from this report and from what we know is that companies just don't look at their cloud the same way that they look at their own internal networks. And you need to be looking at your cloud just like you look at your own internal networks. You need to know who's coming and going.
Yep, and just like how we saw in the other article about supply chains, you have bots and APIs that can become over permissioned, or just you no longer do business with that company, but then the API is still there, and then the other company is still collecting the data, and who knows what they're doing with it, or if they have something that's wrong on their side.
So let's move right along to our last topic of the day. I gotta check my calendar real quick. I have no idea what I'm up against right now. I could be missing a meeting or two. Nope, I'm good. All right. So last topic of the day. This was an interesting one. I wanted to talk about it because the headline is just so strikingly misleading. I was just like, I got to dive into this. So let's talk about this dental practice ransomware nightmare where, what caught my eye is the fact that the article highlighted the fact that this organization paid $71,000, and that's kind of the high-level summary of the article. Was like, hey, they had a ransomware attack, and they paid $71,000. And the reason I looked at that and went, we should talk about that, because somebody could read that and think like, oh, well, this company got ransomware and they only paid $71,000. That's not really what happened here, and that's why we're going to talk about it. So, demands for these attacks are ever increasing on all healthcare, but dentists in particular, they've seen demands escalate to as high as $250,000 to get their ransomware, or get their files back from a ransomware event. But what did you guys see in this article besides the fact that it wasn't just $71,000, which I'm going to dive into in a minute? Did you guys see anything in this article that caught your eye with this dentist ransomware attack?
Yeah, apparently there was a lack of, well, they had a backup, but the lack of actually verifying the backup.
Right.
And then also they did mention the loss of income during those 4 days of canceled appointments. And that is kind of crazy that they were able to get back up and running after just 4 days. So I guess, because they didn't have the backups, they're like, well, we just got to pay the criminals and give them the money.
And
Good.
now I was going to say we've attempted to do work with dental practices, and the thing that especially with them that I always get is, we have everything in the cloud. These are just some machines that we have. Who cares about John Doe's crown tooth? There's no like necessarily sensitive medical information as opposed to like a cancer institution or something like that. So for them, they just feel like out of everybody, they're on the bottom of the tote as far as if someone even cares about what information they have.
Yep. So let's just go through this real quick, right? So they said, they realized something was wrong when their staff couldn't access any patient files. They thought it was a routine software issue, but then a message popped up on other computers saying that their files had been encrypted and they were demanding a ransom. They said that everyone was in shock and they were scared. No one knew what to do. And they decided to quickly disconnect their systems from the internet, but the damage had been done. It was too late. They said they received an email that looked like it was from a patient requesting an appointment. The email had an attachment labeled X-ray results. The employee clicked on it, triggered the ransomware. And they said it was very normal looking and very convincing, and no one questioned it at all. So they were completely paralyzed. They couldn't access patient records. They couldn't schedule appointments. They couldn't even see who was supposed to come in that day. Their practice was brought to a standstill, and they had to cancel all appointments and couldn't operate for 4.5 days. They contacted their IT provider. The IT provider struggled to resolve the issue because the backup wasn't working as expected. We see that a lot, right, guys? We get calls from companies all the time. We're like, oh, we got ransomware. We had an event. Our IT said they had us backed up, and we learned that they didn't. Law enforcement couldn't help. That's going to be common. Law enforcement is not going to help small businesses like this. They're too busy with, other things, bigger things. If you're a big company, then the FBI might help you, maybe. But they're busy, helping all these schools and government entities that are getting hacked. They eventually said they had to negotiate with the attackers and pay the ransom to get their data back. They said it was a tough decision to pay the ransom. They debated it for hours, but without a backup, they had no choice. This is what I talk about when companies are like, oh, we're never going to pay the ransom. Well, when your IT company tells you we don't have your backups, well, the ransom was the only way to recover our files quickly and get back to treating our patients. It felt like we were backed into a corner with no good options. They then found out that their backup system hadn't been working properly for months. There was an issue with the configuration, and they weren't performing regular tests to ensure everything was backing up correctly. So when we needed it most, it failed us. And that's something we hear all the time. Like companies go, we had an issue, we had an event, and our IT company wasn't testing the backups, so they didn't work, and we were up the creek without a paddle. The financial impact was significant. We lost revenue from canceled appointments, and the ransom payment, along with lost revenue, IT support, etc., was a big hit. More importantly, it damaged our patients' trust and the trust of our referring dentists. They rely on us to keep their information safe, and we felt like we let them down. I mean, I like the reaction from the owner, but this clearly cost them a lot more than $71,000. Mm-hmm. This experience taught us that backups are only useful if they work. We've since implemented much more robust backup system and now perform regular checks to ensure everything is backed up correctly. It's a lesson I wish I had learned before this happened. How many times are we trying to have these conversations with people and they don't even want to have the conversation? Oh, we're fine. Our IT company has us taken care of. So they completely overhauled their cybersecurity protocols. They have stricter email filtering. They have regular staff training on phishing, and they have a stronger firewall. They've also hired a cybersecurity firm to conduct regular audits and monitor our systems. Good move. Cybersecurity training is now a top priority. We do regular online training sessions to keep everyone on their toes, and our staff is much more cautious now, and they understand the importance of cybersecurity in protecting our practice. And he says, don't assume it won't happen to you. Take cybersecurity seriously. Invest in good cybersecurity consultants. Train your staff and make sure your backups are working by testing. It's so humbling to realize that everything you built can be wiped out in an instant. I wish I had invested in better cybersecurity sooner and performed the regular backup test. The attack, I wish we had been better prepared with a response plan. Afterward, I realized we needed a more proactive approach to cybersecurity, not just a reactive one. And this goes on to say that the attack strained their relationship with their IT provider because we felt they hadn't done enough to protect them. They moved to a new provider that specializes in cybersecurity for dental practices, and they've become more critical of their vendors, ensuring they meet higher security standards. Anything else? I thought that was amazing. Just all those things right there were just everything a business owner would go through on the backside of a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
We try to do this show. We try to help business people understand what this guy had to learn the hard way, right? Through the school of hard knocks.
The very next comment, he says, it's important to have experts on your side before something goes wrong. And, I give the example, I live in Texas, we have a huge coast, we get the hurricanes, and we always tell people, if you had a house at the coast, not only would you have insurance, you'd have all the other things you needed to protect your house, like the shutters and the stilts and all that. On top of that, you'd want to have somebody there in town, like Port Aransas, for example, that you can call after a hurricane, because when a hurricane happens, his phone's going to blow up and he's not going to be able to answer everybody. And so you want to have somebody you're already talking to before the disaster hits. That way, when it happens, it's a nice little simple phone call to a friend. And he's like, yeah, I'll put you on my list and I'll help you as soon as I can. It's the same thing here with cybersecurity. It's with cybercrime. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's going to happen eventually. So you want to have that expert already in your Rolodex. You already know, and hopefully you're using them to make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. But if it does, because it's likely to, you're limiting the blast radius, and you got a way back. So good point.
The only thing I read in his kind of interview there that I would kind of point out to people, it sounds to me like he switched IT companies.
Yep.
And he said to a company that specializes in cybersecurity for dentists.
Yep.
So you basically hired an IT company, and it's great you're doing quarterly audits or whatever you're doing, but you hired a company that's checking their own work. And that might be okay to a point, but I guess what I'm okay with is if that IT company wants to do the quarterly audits, but you better have some independent company coming in from the outside at least once a year, just double checking everything, right? Because we've seen it too many times, right, guys, where the IT company or the IT department says they're checking the backups, and they bought Datto and they're going off the screenshots that come in the email every day. That's not a full test restore in my book. That's a nice, okay, yeah, that worked for tonight, but you better be doing full-blown test restores if you really want to make sure that this stuff is there. Meaning, like, periodically somebody takes your backup, puts it somewhere, and says, yep, we can spin up that machine somewhere else, or we can access all the data that we need to access. And you do it in a separate environment, just like you would if you needed to recover that data. The other interesting thing that I saw, wanted to kind of point out in this article, is it didn't really sound like they recovered to new systems. Didn't really mention a cost around buying new systems or having to So, for what it's worth, I mean, these guys are kind of lucky they didn't get hit again. Because when you don't wipe the systems, when you don't, clean things up properly, these guys will put back doors in, they do all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't mean they're going to strike a week or two later. They could strike 6 months later. I think we just talked about one a couple of weeks ago on the show where it looked like maybe the hackers used a back door and got in many, many months later. And that, these guys don't care when they hit, if they know they can hit you again. So just a word of caution for anyone reading that. You want to make sure you're wiping your systems or doing something that, getting new systems or something like that. Because if you don't know how they got in, and clearly their cybersecurity wasn't up to snuff to tell them, like, hey, this is how these guys got in and this is what you need to take care of. They probably needed to rebuild from the ground up. And I didn't get the sense that he said he did that. Did you?
No.
Yeah. So,
but I'm glad that he went on. Well, it was anonymous, but I'm glad he went on record because we need more of these type of testimonials that we can show to our clients. I wish it was on video. I mean, because if you look at all the other industries, right? You have from smoking to diseases. They can always catch someone to say, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have not drink and drive or whatever like that. But it would be so great if we can start getting video testimonials to show our clients, like, look, this guy over here in Nebraska, this happened to him. And because what did I had mentioned? I said most dental offices are saying we don't need to back up everything because everything's in the cloud. But he had to pay $71,000. So clearly he was doing something, locally in his computer. And then one other thing I see in a lot of these offices, they're using these Gmail accounts. I run away. I don't know if you see that in these doctors' offices, and everybody just has Gmail accounts. So scary.
Well, the other thing too is you shouldn't be emailing X-rays, right? That tells you right there that they didn't even have awareness, like the security awareness training that he says is needed, right? Like no doctor's office, no dentist, no medical practice should be allowing patients to email them medical records like X-rays, number one. So the fact that that was even common practice, and like he said, nobody thought about it. It looked legit. Well, it shouldn't be happening in the first place. It's just like when my company gets those, hey, change my payroll information. Well, no, like we don't do it that way. So like you sending us those emails makes zero sense for us. We're never going to fall for it because we have a way for our employees to do that, right? And it's not through email.
Yeah, this also makes me kind of worried. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. But were these people in their emails before they ever sent an email?
No, but what they could have been in is the patient's email.
Right.
Understanding how this. Dude, I'm going to tell you right now, like our company today, we just got phishing emails this morning, a slew of them that look like ConnectWise tickets. Like literally look like ConnectWise tickets. Wow. And I was like, that's interesting. It had the same status, that like the status was set to something that we have in our ConnectWise. These guys are getting that good where they're like, there's a good chance this company's probably using ConnectWise or Kaseya or whatever. Let's send them phishing emails that look like the ticket. I mean, I knew it was spam because what was in the ticket and in the context of the ticket was not relevant to us at all. And then as soon as I looked at the from address, it wasn't anything that was related to us. But dude, I mean, they're getting very, very, very good at this stuff. Like they are making emails look like a lot of legitimate things that you encounter on an everyday basis. So if you're not looking, if you're not paying attention, if you're not being vigilant, you could get caught one day.
Yep.
It's the proverbial Randy matter of if but when. Right? It's not if you're going to get tricked by a phishing email, it's when you get tricked by a phishing email. Right?
Yep.
All right, guys. Appreciate your time. Thanks for your input. Anything else you guys want to add before we end the stream?
No, that's all.
Oh, good. All right, cool. See you everybody next week.
Okay, bye.
Stay safe out there. Share the show.
Bye, everyone.